The iron horse screeched into Florence Station on a blistering August afternoon in 1882, its steam rising like ghosts against the Arizona sky, and Willa Kendrick gripped her worn carpet bag with white knuckles as she prepared to meet the stranger who would become her husband. She had responded to the advertisement 3 months prior, back when the boarding house in Philadelphia had raised its rates, and her seamstress wages barely covered a single meal a day. The words had been simple, honest, requesting a woman of decent character to marry a rancher in the Arizona territory. No promises of wealth or easy living, just a roof over her head and a partnership. That honesty had appealed to her more than the flowery proposals from other men seeking wives through correspondence. The train lurched to a complete stop, and Willa stood on trembling legs. Through the dusty window, she could see the platform, a rough wooden structure that looked like it might blow away in a strong wind. Several people milled about, but her eyes found him immediately. He stood apart from the others, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat in his hands, revealing sandy brown hair that caught the sunlight. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his posture, the way he scanned each window of the passenger car with what looked like equal parts hope and dread. This was Ethan Abbott, the man whose letters had been brief but kind, whose handwriting had been careful and deliberate, whose words had never made promises he could not keep. She knew he was 28 years old, that he had inherited his father's ranch 5 years ago, that he had been engaged once before, but the woman had died of fever before they could marry. She knew he raised cattle and horses, that he had a dog named Rusty, and that he believed in treating people fairly regardless of their station in life. What she did not know was whether she could truly go through with this. Whether she could step off this train and bind her life to a stranger in a land so foreign it might as well be another country entirely. The other passengers were already disembarking, their voices carrying through the car. Willa remained in her seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched through the window as Ethan's expression shifted from hopeful to confused, then to something that looked like resignation. He was expecting her, waiting for her, and she was sitting here like a coward. Move, she told herself. Move or spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. Her legs felt wooden as she finally stood, collecting her bag and the small trunk that held everything she owned in the world. The porter helped her with the trunk, setting it on the platform with a thud that seemed to echo in her ears. The heat hit her like a physical thing, so different from the humid warmth of Philadelphia summers. This was a dry, relentless heat that seemed to steal the moisture from her skin in seconds. Willa stepped onto the platform and froze. She could not make her feet move any further, could not make herself walk toward the man who was now looking directly at her, recognition dawning on his face. He had her photograph, a small tintype she had sent in her second letter, so he knew who she was. Just as she knew him from the photograph he had sent, though the reality of him was somehow both exactly as she had imagined and completely different. He was moving toward her now, his long strides eating up the distance between them. She wanted to run, wanted to climb back onto that train and disappear, wanted to be anywhere but here in this moment. But her feet would not obey, and then he was standing in front of her, and it was too late for running. "Miss Kendrick." His voice was deeper than she had imagined, rough like stones tumbling in a river, but there was a gentleness to it that made something in her chest loosen just slightly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her throat felt like it was closing up, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She was making a fool of herself, she knew, standing here mute and terrified like a child. Ethan did not seem put off by her silence. Instead, he smiled, and it was such a genuine, warm expression that Willa felt tears prick at her eyes. "I am mighty glad you came," he said, and there was relief in his voice that sounded so sincere she almost believed it. "I know this is frightening. I know you do not know me from Adam, and you have just traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger in a place you have never seen. That would make anyone scared, and there is no shame in it." The kindness in his words, the understanding, broke something loose inside her. She had expected awkwardness, perhaps disappointment when he saw her in person rather than in a carefully posed photograph. She had expected him to rush through pleasantries and hurry her to a preacher, eager to formalize their arrangement. She had not expected this patience, this compassion. "I am frightened," she whispered, the words barely audible. It was the truth, stark and simple, and saying it aloud made her feel both vulnerable and oddly relieved. "I know," Ethan said, and he did not move closer, did not try to touch her or take her hand. He simply stood there, giving her space to breathe, to adjust. "But I promise you, Willa, I will never hurt you. I will never raise my hand to you or speak cruel words. I brought you here to be my partner, my helpmate, not my servant or my property. Whatever you need, whatever time you need to feel comfortable, you will have it." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his brown eyes. There were lines at the corners, weathered from sun and wind, and his face was deeply tanned. His hands were calloused and rough, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. But there was kindness in his expression and something else, loneliness perhaps, a loneliness that matched her own. "I want to believe you," she said, her voice still quiet but stronger now. "Then that is a start," Ethan replied. He glanced at her trunk. "Let me get your things loaded. The wagon is just over there. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town, and I thought we could stop by Reverend Miller's place on the way if you are willing. He knows we are coming today. But if you would rather wait, if you need more time to settle in first, we can do that too." Willa considered this. Every practical bone in her body said to marry him today, to secure her position and her future as quickly as possible. But another part of her, a part that was still raw from the shock of her new surroundings, wanted to delay, wanted time to catch her breath. "Today," she said, making her decision. "I would like to do it today if that is acceptable to you." Relief flashed across Ethan's face again. "More than acceptable, I will admit. I worried you might change your mind, that you might take one look at Florence and decide you made a terrible mistake." "I might have," Willa said, surprising herself with the honesty. "But I had nothing left in Philadelphia. No family, no prospects, no hope of anything better. Whatever awaits me here cannot be worse than what I left behind." Ethan's expression softened. "I am sorry you had such a hard time of it. But I will do my best to make sure your future is brighter than your past." He gestured toward the wagon, a sturdy-looking vehicle with a canvas cover. "Come on, let us get you out of this sun before you melt." He lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing and carried it to the wagon, setting it carefully in the back. Then he returned for her carpet bag, but Willa kept hold of it, needing something to occupy her hands. As they walked to the wagon, she noticed people watching them with curious eyes, and she felt her face flush with embarrassment. "They are just curious," Ethan said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "Mail-order brides are not uncommon out here, but it still gives folks something to talk about. They will lose interest soon enough." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand steadying her elbow briefly before he released her and climbed up beside her. The seat was sun-warmed through her skirts, and she arranged her belongings at her feet as Ethan took up the reins. The town of Florence rolled past them as they drove, and Willa took it all in with wide eyes. It was small, much smaller than Philadelphia, with wooden buildings lining a main street that was nothing but packed dirt. She saw a general store, a saloon, what looked like a doctor's office, and various other establishments. People walked along wooden sidewalks and horses were tied to hitching posts in front of several buildings. "It is not much," Ethan said, following her gaze, "but it has what we need. The general store can order things if you need something special, though it takes time to arrive. There is a good doctor, Doc Stevens, and his wife Rose is the unofficial midwife for the area. The schoolhouse is just past the church, though there are only about 15 children in the whole area right now." Willa listened to him talk, his voice steady and calming as he pointed out various landmarks. She appreciated that he was trying to help her feel more at ease, giving her information about her new home without overwhelming her with too much at once. They left the town behind, heading out onto a road that cut through scrubland dotted with strange, twisted plants, unlike anything Willa had seen before. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in a way that took her breath, all red earth and endless sky. "Those are mesquite trees," Ethan said, pointing to some of the twisted plants. "And that tall one there with the arms is a saguaro cactus. They only grow in this part of the country, can live to be 200 years old." "It is all so different," Willa murmured, "so open. There are no buildings, no crowds, no noise." "Does that bother you?" She considered the question carefully. "I do not know yet. I think perhaps I will like it once I am accustomed to it. Philadelphia was always so crowded, so loud. There was never any peace." "There is plenty of peace out here," Ethan said. "Maybe too much sometimes. It can get lonely, especially during the winter months when travel is difficult and you do not see anyone outside the ranch for weeks at a time. You mentioned in one of your letters that you have ranch hands. How many?" "3 full-time. Miguel has been with me since my father's time. He is the foreman, knows more about ranching than I could learn in 10 lifetimes. His wife Carla cooks for the hands and helps with the house sometimes, though I did not want you to think you would be expected to manage everything alone. Then there is Jack, who is good with horses, and a younger fellow named Thomas who is still learning but works hard." Willa nodded, processing this information. So there would be other people around at least. She would not be completely isolated with a strange man. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan continued, "The main house is separate from the bunkhouse where the men sleep. You will have privacy, and they all know to be respectful. Miguel is particularly protective. He and Carla lost their daughter a few years back, and Carla especially has been excited about having another woman around." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Willa found herself relaxing slightly, the rhythmic motion and the warmth of the sun making her drowsy. She had barely slept on the train, too anxious about what awaited her. "There it is," Ethan said, and she looked up to see a small, neat house ahead. It was painted white with a cross on top, clearly a church. A smaller building sat beside it, presumably the Reverend's home. Reverend Miller turned out to be a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. His wife, Martha, bustled out to greet them, her face wreathed in smiles. "Oh, you poor dear, you must be exhausted from your journey," Martha said, taking Willa's hands in hers. "Come inside and have some water at least before the ceremony. You look half dead from the heat." Willa found herself shepherded into the cool interior of the Reverend's home, where Martha pressed a cup of water into her hands and fussed over her like a mother hen. It was overwhelming and comforting all at once, and Willa felt some of her anxiety ease. "You need a moment alone, child," Martha asked quietly, her eyes searching Willa's face. "This is a big step, and there is no shame in taking time to think." "I am ready," Willa said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. The fear was still there, thrumming beneath her skin, but it was manageable now. Ethan had been nothing but kind, nothing but patient, and she had made this choice back in Philadelphia. She would see it through. The ceremony itself was brief and simple. Reverend Miller read from his Bible, his voice solemn as he spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the responsibilities of husband and wife. Ethan stood beside Willa, his presence solid and reassuring. When it came time for vows, his voice was clear and steady. I, Ethan Abbott, take you, Willa Kendrick, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, to provide for you, and to treat you with kindness and respect all the days of my life. Willa repeated her own vows, her voice shakier but no less sincere. And then Reverend Miller was pronouncing them man and wife, and it was done. She was married. She was Willa Abbott now, tied to this man and this place for the rest of her life. Ethan did not kiss her. He simply took her hand and squeezed it gently, a gesture of reassurance that she appreciated more than she could say. Martha produced a small cake, insisting they at least have a piece to celebrate, and they sat in the Reverend's parlor for a short while, making polite conversation. Finally, they were back in the wagon, heading further from town. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the land. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked after they had been riding for some time. "I think so," Willa said. "It all feels very strange, very unreal. This morning I was on a train, and now I am married to a man I have only just met." "I know it is not ideal," Ethan said quietly. "If circumstances were different, I would have courted you properly, taken you to church socials and for walks, given you time to know me before making such a commitment. But life does not always give us ideal circumstances." "No, it does not," Willa agreed. She looked at him, this man who was now her husband. "Why did you choose me? From my letter, I mean. You must have had other responses to your advertisement." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "I did," he admitted. "But your letter was different. The others all talked about what they hoped to gain, what they expected from a husband. But yours talked about what you could offer, what kind of partnership you hoped to build. You were honest about your circumstances, about why you were seeking a marriage out west. That honesty meant something to me." Willa felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Your letters were honest too. You did not try to make the life sound easier than it is. I did not want you coming here with false expectations. This is hard country, and ranch life is not easy. There are good parts, beautiful parts, but there is plenty of struggle too." "I am not afraid of hard work," Willa said. "I have been working since I was 12 years old. I can cook and clean and sew. I can manage a household and a budget. I may not know anything about ranching, but I can learn." "I have no doubt you can," Ethan said, and there was warmth in his voice that made Willa feel something flutter in her stomach. "But you do not have to prove yourself to me, Willa. You are here, and that is enough." They crested a small rise, and Ethan pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said, pointing. "That is home." Willa looked, and her breath caught. In a shallow valley below, surrounded by cottonwood trees, sat a ranch house. It was larger than she had expected, built of wood with a wide porch running along the front. She could see a barn and several other outbuildings, corrals with horses, and in the distance, cattle grazing. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It was my father's dream," Ethan said softly. "He came out here with nothing but determination and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Built this place with his own hands with help from friends. He died 5 years ago, and my mother followed him 6 months later. I think her heart just gave out from missing him." "I am sorry," Willa said, and she meant it. She could hear the love and loss in his voice. "They would have liked you," Ethan said. "My mother especially. She always said a ranch needed a woman's touch to really be a home." They descended into the valley, and as they approached the house, Willa could see people emerging from the barn. A man with dark hair and sun-weathered skin, a woman with graying hair and a kind face, and two younger men. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, then came around to help Willa. His hands were gentle on her waist as he lifted her down, and she felt that flutter again, stronger this time. "Everyone, this is Willa, my wife," Ethan said, and Willa heard the pride in his voice. "Willa, this is Miguel and Carla, Jack and Thomas." "Welcome, welcome," Carla said, hurrying forward to embrace Willa despite the dust and heat. "Oh, it is so good to have another woman here." "Come, you must be exhausted. Let me show you inside." Willa found herself swept along by Carla's enthusiasm, barely having time to nod to the men before she was being ushered into the house. The interior was dim and cool, a relief after the heat outside. She had an impression of solid furniture, clean floors, and windows with actual glass panes before Carla was pulling her toward the back of the house. "This is your room," Carla said, opening a door. "Ethan fixed it up special, though he will never admit it. New curtains, new quilt, even had me help him make sure everything was clean and ready." The room was larger than any Willa had ever called her own. A big bed dominated the space, covered in a beautiful quilt in shades of blue and cream. There was a dresser, a washstand with a china basin and pitcher, and a chair near the window. The curtains were simple but pretty, and through the window she could see the cottonwoods swaying in the breeze. "It is lovely," Willa said, her throat tight with emotion. After years of living in a cramped boarding house room barely big enough for a narrow cot and a small trunk, this felt like a palace. "There is a room across the hall," Carla said carefully, and Willa understood immediately what she was implying. Ethan had his own room. They would not be expected to share a bed immediately. Relief washed over her so intensely she felt lightheaded. "Thank you," she whispered. Carla patted her arm. "He is a good man, our Ethan, patient and kind. You do not have to fear him." Then more briskly, "Now I will get some water heated so you can wash up. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. Nothing fancy tonight, just stew and bread, but it is filling." After Carla left, Willa sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. The enormity of what she had done hit her all at once. She was in Arizona territory, married to a stranger in a house in the middle of nowhere. There was no going back. No train ticket home, no family to return to, nothing but this new life she had chosen. She thought about the man who was now her husband. Ethan had been everything he had promised in his letters and more. Kind, patient, understanding. He had given her space when she needed it, had not pressured her or made demands. He had prepared a room for her, had made sure she would be comfortable. Could she really do this? Could she build a life here? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Willa, may I come in?" "Yes," she said, standing up and smoothing her skirts. Ethan entered, carrying her trunk. He set it down carefully near the dresser. "I thought you might want to unpack a bit, get settled. If you need anything at all, just let me know." "Thank you," Willa said, "for everything. For the room, for being patient with me on the platform today. I know I did not make a very good first impression, standing there like a frightened rabbit." "You made a fine impression," Ethan said firmly. "You were honest about your fear, and that takes courage. I would rather have someone honest than someone pretending to be something they are not." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Willa, I want you to know that I meant what I said in my vows. I will honor you and treat you with respect. I know trust has to be earned, and I am prepared to take whatever time is needed to earn yours." After he left, Willa opened her trunk and began unpacking her meager belongings. A few dresses, some undergarments, a nightgown, a shawl her mother had made before she died. A small wooden box that held her few treasures, a locket with her parents' pictures, some old letters, a pressed flower from her mother's grave. She arranged everything in the dresser, hung her dresses on the pegs along the wall, and felt a small sense of ownership begin to take root. This was her room in her new home with her new husband. That evening they ate dinner together at a long table in the kitchen. Carla's stew was delicious, rich and hearty, and the bread was fresh and warm. Miguel and the other ranch hands ate with them, and the conversation flowed easily around her. They talked about cattle and horses, about a fence that needed mending, about whether they would get rain soon. Willa listened more than she spoke, learning the rhythms of this new life. She noticed how Ethan treated his men with respect, how they clearly admired him. She noticed how Carla and Miguel exchanged glances full of years of shared understanding. She noticed how young Thomas watched her with shy curiosity, and how Jack barely looked at her at all, focused entirely on his food. After dinner, Ethan walked her out to the porch. The sun had set, and the sky was ablaze with stars like Willa had never seen. In Philadelphia, the city lights had drowned out all but the brightest stars. Here, the heavens were a blanket of light, so beautiful it made her breath catch. "It is magnificent," she whispered. "One of my favorite things about living out here," Ethan said. "Never gets old, no matter how many times I see it." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, and Willa felt some of her tension ease away. The night air was cooler now, pleasant after the heat of the day. She could hear the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of insects, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. "I should let you rest," Ethan said finally. "You have had a long day and you must be exhausted." "I am," Willa admitted, "but it is a good kind of tired, if that makes sense." "It does," Ethan said. He looked at her, and even in the dim light from the windows, she could see the warmth in his eyes. "I am glad you are here, Willa. I know it will take time for this to feel like home, but I hope eventually it will." "I hope so too," Willa said softly. That night, lying in her new bed in her new room, Willa stared at the ceiling and thought about the future. She thought about the man sleeping across the hall, this stranger who was now her husband. She thought about the vast, beautiful, harsh land that surrounded them. She thought about the fear that still lingered in her heart, and the small spark of hope that had begun to kindle there as well. Maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice after all. The first weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and learning. Willa threw herself into learning the rhythms of ranch life, determined to be useful and to earn her place. Carla taught her how to cook with the ingredients available, which were different from what she had used in Philadelphia. She learned to make tortillas from Carla, to cook beans properly, to use chili peppers and spices she had never encountered before. She learned that water was precious and could not be wasted, that the heat of the day was best spent indoors or in shade, that rattlesnakes were a real danger, and she needed to watch where she walked. She learned the names of the horses, the patterns of the cattle's grazing, the schedule of ranch work that governed each day. And slowly, carefully, she learned about Ethan. He was an early riser, up before dawn to help with the morning chores. He worked alongside his men, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. He was patient with the animals, firm but kind, and she noticed that even the most skittish horses calmed under his hands. He was also true to his word about giving her space. He never entered her room without knocking. He never pressured her or made inappropriate demands. They ate meals together, worked near each other during the day, and talked in the evenings on the porch. But he maintained a respectful distance that both relieved, and as time went on began to frustrate her, because Willa was discovering something unexpected. She was attracted to her husband. It had started small, with an appreciation for his physical appearance. He was undeniably handsome with his strong features and warm brown eyes. But it was more than that. She found herself drawn to the way he moved, confident and capable. She liked his voice, the way it rumbled deep in his chest. She liked his hands, calloused and strong but so gentle when he handled a newborn calf or fixed a broken bit of tack. She liked the way he treated people, with fairness and respect. She liked his sense of humor, dry and understated but present. She liked the way he listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words mattered. And she began to want more than the polite, careful distance he maintained. It was a month after her arrival when things began to shift. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It had become their routine, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You have done remarkably well adjusting to life here," Ethan said. "Carla tells me you are a natural in the kitchen, and I have seen how hard you work around the house." "I like staying busy," Willa said, "and everyone has been so kind, so patient with my questions." "You do not have to work so hard, you know," Ethan said gently. "I did not bring you here to be a servant." "I know," Willa said, "but I want to contribute. I want to feel like I am truly part of this place, not just a guest." Ethan nodded slowly. "You are part of this place. You are my wife." He said it simply, but there was weight to the words. Willa took a breath, gathering her courage. In name, yes, but not truly. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan turned to look at her, and she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I do not want to rush you," he said carefully. "I meant what I said about giving you time." "I know you did," Willa said, "and I appreciate that more than you know, but Ethan, it has been a month. I am comfortable here now. I am comfortable with you." She felt her face heat but pressed on. "I would like for this to be a real marriage if you are willing." Something flashed in Ethan's eyes, hot and bright, before he controlled it. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel obligated." "I am certain," Willa said. "I want this. I want us to truly be husband and wife." Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I would like that too," he said quietly. "I have been trying to be patient, to give you space, but Willa, I have come to care for you. These past weeks, getting to know you, watching you become part of this place, part of my life, it has meant more to me than I can say." Willa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I care for you too. I did not expect to, not so soon, but I do." Ethan stood, still holding her hand, and gently pulled her to her feet. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Willa whispered. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, and bent his head to hers. The kiss was soft at first, almost tentative, as though he was still giving her the chance to change her mind. But Willa pressed closer, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and the kiss deepened. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you stepped off that train," he admitted. "Really?" Willa was surprised. "I was so frightened, so awkward." "You were beautiful," Ethan said firmly, "and brave. Coming all this way to marry a stranger, that took real courage." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This man, this place, this life, it was all right. That night she did not sleep in her room. She went to Ethan's room across the hall, and he welcomed her with tenderness and passion that left her breathless. He was careful with her, patient, making sure she was comfortable and willing every step of the way. And when it was over, he held her close, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. Willa's breath caught. It was so soon, too soon by any reasonable standard, and yet the words felt right. "I love you too," she whispered back, and knew it was true, From that night on, they shared a room, shared a bed, shared a life in truth as well as name. The careful distance that had marked their first month together dissolved, replaced by an easy intimacy that felt natural and right. Willa discovered that marriage to Ethan was nothing like she had feared. He was a generous lover and a considerate partner. He asked her opinion on ranch matters and actually listened to her suggestions. He laughed at her jokes and shared his own worries and dreams with her. The ranch itself began to feel like home in a way the boarding house never had. She loved the morning routine of making coffee while Ethan did the early chores, loved the way he would come in smelling of horses and hay and pull her into his arms for a kiss before breakfast. She loved working in the kitchen with Carla, learning new recipes and trading stories. She loved the evenings on the porch, watching the sunset with Ethan's arm around her shoulders. She even began to help with some of the lighter ranch work. Ethan taught her to ride, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could manage a horse well enough to ride out with him to check on the cattle. She learned to recognize signs of illness in the animals, to help with feeding and watering, to mend tack when it broke. The land itself began to work its way into her heart. She learned to see the beauty in the harsh landscape, in the twisted mesquite trees and towering saguaros. She learned to love the vast open spaces, the endless sky, the way storms could be seen approaching from miles away. She learned the smell of creosote after rain, the coolness of the river that ran through their property, the particular quality of light at dawn and dusk. 3 months after her arrival, Willa realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another few weeks to be sure and then sought out Carla. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly as they worked together in the kitchen one afternoon. Carla's face lit up with joy. "Oh, that is wonderful. Have you told Ethan yet?" "Not yet. I wanted to be certain first. But I am 3 weeks late now, and I have been feeling strange in the mornings." "Then you should definitely tell him," Carla said firmly. "He will be over the moon." That evening after dinner, Willa asked Ethan to walk with her. They strolled away from the house toward the river, the setting sun painting everything gold. "Is everything all right?" Ethan asked, concern in his voice. "You have been quiet this evening." "Everything is fine," Willa assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I have something to tell you." She stopped walking and turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, I am fairly certain I am going to have a baby." His eyes went wide, his mouth opening in surprise. "A baby, truly?" "I think so. I am late and I have been feeling odd in the mornings. I cannot be completely certain yet, but all the signs point to yes." A grin spread across Ethan's face, so wide and joyful that Willa could not help but smile back. Then he was lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing with pure delight. "We are going to have a baby." He shouted to the sky, his voice echoing across the valley. "Willa, this is wonderful, this is perfect." He set her down carefully as though she were suddenly made of glass. "Are you happy about it?" he asked, his expression turning more serious. "I know we have only been married a short while. If you are worried or frightened, we can get Doc Stevens out here to check on you." "I am happy," Willa said, and realized it was true. 6 months ago, if someone had told her she would be standing in the Arizona territory, married to a rancher and pregnant with his child, she would have thought them insane. But now, looking into Ethan's eyes and seeing the love and joy there, she could not imagine being anywhere else. "I am very happy. I love you," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. "I love you so much, Willa. Thank you for taking a chance on me on this place. Thank you for making this house a home." "I love you too," Willa said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never imagined I could be this happy. When I stepped off that train, I was so frightened, but you made me feel safe. You made me feel valued and cared for. You gave me a home and a family." They stood there by the river as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa felt a profound sense of gratitude for the circumstances that had brought her to this moment. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Doc Stevens came out to the ranch to examine Willa and confirmed that she was indeed expecting, likely due in late spring. He gave her instructions for staying healthy and told Ethan to stop hovering quite so much, which made everyone laugh. Ethan did hover, though he tried to hide it. He insisted Willa rest more, worried when she did too much work, and started planning for the baby's arrival with an enthusiasm that was endearing. Winter came, bringing cooler temperatures that were a relief after the brutal heat of summer and fall. Willa learned what Ethan had meant about isolation during the winter months. Travel to town became less frequent as the roads turned muddy with rain. They saw fewer visitors, and the ranch felt more remote than ever, but Willa did not mind. She spent her days in domestic tasks, sewing tiny clothes for the baby, helping Carla with cooking and preserving food, reading books from Ethan's small collection. She spent her evenings with her husband, talking and planning for their growing family. As her belly swelled with the baby, Ethan became even more attentive. He rubbed her aching back, fetched things for her when she was too tired to move, and talked to her belly at night, telling the baby stories about the ranch and promising to teach it to ride as soon as it was old enough. "Do you want a boy or a girl?" Willa asked him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach. "I want a healthy baby and a healthy wife," Ethan said firmly. "I do not care which, though I will admit the thought of a little girl with your eyes would be pretty wonderful." "I think a boy who looks like you would be perfect," Willa countered. "Strong and kind, just like his father." "Then perhaps we should hope for twins," Ethan teased, and Willa laughed, swatting at him playfully. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers that transformed the harsh landscape into something magical. Willa, now heavily pregnant and uncomfortable, spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival. Carla helped her set up a cradle in their bedroom, carved by Miguel from cottonwood and polished until it shone. The baby came on a warm evening in late April. Willa's labor started just after dinner, and Ethan immediately sent Thomas racing for Doc Stevens and Rose, his wife. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Willa was certain she could not go on. But Rose and Carla were there, coaching her through it, and Ethan never left her side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. Finally, as dawn was breaking, the baby arrived. A boy, small but healthy, with a powerful set of lungs that announced his arrival to the whole ranch. "A son," Ethan said, his voice choked with emotion as Doc Stevens placed the baby in his arms. "Willa, we have a son." Willa, exhausted but elated, reached for the baby. Ethan placed him carefully in her arms, and she looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature that she and Ethan had created. "He is perfect," she whispered. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the winter, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Ethan said, "What about Samuel? It was my father's name." "Samuel Abbott," Willa said, testing the name. "I like it. Samuel it is." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and strong, though he kept them up at all hours with his feeding and fussing. Willa learned to function on very little sleep, to nurse while half-conscious, to change diapers with her eyes closed. Ethan was a devoted father, getting up with her in the night, walking the floor with Samuel when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint. He sang to the baby in a surprisingly good voice, made silly faces to coax out smiles, and talked to Samuel constantly, narrating everything he did during the day. The ranch hands were all charmed by the baby. Miguel carved toys for him. Thomas brought him a rabbit's foot for luck, And even gruff Jack could be seen smiling when Samuel grabbed his finger with a tiny fist. As Samuel grew from a newborn to an infant, Willa marveled at how her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been alone and struggling in Philadelphia, working long hours for little pay, with no prospects and no hope for anything better. Now she had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, a home, and a purpose. She thought sometimes about the woman she had been on that train platform, silent and frightened, unable to take a step forward. She thought about how Ethan's gentle words had given her the courage to try, to take a chance on a new life in a strange place. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked one evening. They were on the porch as always, watching the sunset. Samuel was asleep in her arms, his small face peaceful. "I was thinking about the day I arrived," Willa said. "How scared I was, how close I came to getting back on that train." "I was terrified too," Ethan admitted. "When you did not get off right away, I was sure you had changed your mind, that you had taken one look at Florence and decided to keep going west to somewhere better." "I almost did," Willa confessed. "Not keep going west, but get back on the train and return to Philadelphia. I was so frightened I could barely breathe." "What changed your mind?" Willa thought about it. "You did. The way you spoke to me, the kindness in your voice. You did not try to rush me or pressure me. You just stood there and told me you understood that it was all right to be frightened. That gave me the courage to stay." Ethan reached over and took her free hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am glad you stayed. You and Samuel are the best things that ever happened to me." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Willa said softly. "You gave me a home, a family, a life I never dared to dream about." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to appear. Samuel stirred in Willa's arms, making the small snuffling sounds that meant he would wake soon and want to nurse. But for this moment, everything was perfect. The years rolled by in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Samuel grew from an infant to a toddler to a young boy, full of energy and curiosity. He followed Ethan everywhere, learning about horses and cattle, asking endless questions in his high, clear voice. He had Ethan's brown eyes and Willa's dark hair, and a smile that could charm anyone. When Samuel was 3, Willa became pregnant again. This time, the news was less surprising but no less joyful. Their daughter was born on a cool October evening with far less drama than Samuel's birth. They named her Ellen, after Willa's mother. Ellen was different from Samuel from the start. Where he had been active and demanding, she was calm and observant. She rarely cried, preferring to watch the world with wide, serious eyes. As she grew, she proved to be thoughtful and gentle, with a particular affinity for the ranch animals. With 2 children, the ranch house felt truly alive. There was always noise, always activity, always something happening. Willa's days were full of cooking and cleaning and caring for the children, but she loved every moment of it. She loved the sound of Samuel's laughter as Ethan chased him around the yard. She loved Ellen's small hand in hers as they fed the chickens together. She loved the family dinners where everyone gathered around the table, sharing food and stories. The ranch prospered under Ethan's management. He expanded the herd, added more horses, made improvements to the buildings and fences. Willa helped with the business side, keeping the books and managing the household budget with a careful eye. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and that was more than enough. Miguel and Carla became like family, grandparents to Samuel and Ellen in all but name. Jack eventually married a woman from town and built a small house on the ranch property. Thomas grew from a green young man to a skilled ranch hand, taking on more responsibility as the years passed. When Samuel was 7 and Ellen 4, Willa found herself pregnant again. She was older now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous two. She tired more easily and suffered from persistent nausea that left her weak and miserable. Ethan was worried, hovering even more than he had with her first pregnancy. He wanted to send for Doc Stevens every time she felt ill, wanted her to rest constantly, wanted to do everything for her. "I am fine," Willa assured him repeatedly. "This is just part of being pregnant. I went through this with Samuel and Ellen." "Not like this," Ethan said stubbornly. "You were not this sick before. What if something is wrong?" To ease his worry, Willa finally agreed to have Doc Stevens come out for an examination. The doctor, now gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, checked her thoroughly and then sat back with a smile. "Everything is fine," he announced. "Better than fine, actually. Mrs. Abbott, you are carrying twins." The room seemed to spin. "Twins?" Willa gasped. "Twins," Doc Stevens confirmed. "I can hear 2 distinct heartbeats. That explains why you are so much more uncomfortable this time around. Your body is working twice as hard." Ethan looked like he did not know whether to be thrilled or terrified. "Twins," he repeated. 2 babies. 2 babies," Willa echoed. Then, despite her exhaustion and discomfort, she started to laugh. "Well, I suppose we will need a bigger cradle." The twins, another boy and a girl, were born in late winter. The birth was difficult, and for a while, both Willa and the babies were in danger. But Doc Stevens and Rose worked tirelessly, and in the end, everyone came through safely. They named the boy James and the girl Catherine, and the house became even more chaotic with 4 children. Samuel, now old enough to be a real help, took his role as big brother seriously. Ellen was gentle with the babies, always wanting to help care for them. The years continued to pass. The children grew and the ranch thrived. Samuel showed a real talent for working with horses, while Ellen gravitated toward helping her mother with domestic tasks and caring for the smaller animals. James was bold and adventurous, always getting into mischief, while Catherine was sweet and affectionate, everyone's favorite. Willa watched her children grow and marveled at the life she and Ethan had built together. She watched her husband too, saw the gray beginning to thread through his brown hair, the lines deepening around his eyes. He was still strong and capable, still the kind, patient man who had spoken gentle words to a frightened bride on a train platform all those years ago. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan surprised her with a trip to Florence. They left the children with Miguel and Carla for the day and rode to town together, just the 2 of them. "Where are we going?" Willa asked as Ethan guided the wagon past the general store and toward the edge of town. "You will see," he said mysteriously. They stopped in front of a photographer's studio, something that had not existed when Willa first arrived. "We never had our photograph taken," Ethan said. "I want one, something to mark today. 10 years married, 4 children, a life built together." Inside the studio, they posed stiffly while the photographer arranged them and fussed with his equipment. But when Willa looked at the finished photograph weeks later, she saw past the formal poses to the truth beneath. She saw the love in Ethan's eyes as he looked at her, saw the contentment in her own expression, saw the evidence of a true partnership. That photograph took pride of place on the mantel in their home, alongside one of all 4 children taken the following year. More years passed. Samuel grew into a tall, capable young man who knew as much about ranching as his father. Ellen blossomed into a beautiful young woman with a kind heart and capable hands. The twins grew from mischievous children into responsible adolescents, though James still had a wild streak, and Catherine still had everyone wrapped around her finger. Willa and Ethan grew older too. Their hair turned gray, their bodies showed the wear of years of hard work, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and weathered storms. They sat on the porch every evening still, watching the sunset together. Sometimes the children joined them, sometimes it was just the two of them, but the ritual remained constant. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Willa asked one evening. They were alone, the children all occupied elsewhere. On the platform. "I said a lot of things," Ethan replied, his hand finding hers automatically. "Which part do you mean? You said you knew I was frightened, that it would make anyone scared. You said there was no shame in it. And then you promised me you would never hurt me, that you would give me whatever time I needed." "I remember," Ethan said softly. "I meant every word." "I know you did," Willa said. "And you kept every promise. You gave me time, gave me patience, gave me a life beyond anything I had imagined. You gave me love, Ethan. Real love, not just the words but the actions behind them." "You gave me the same," Ethan said. "You took a chance on a stranger in a strange land. You built a home here, raised our children, became my true partner in every way. I could not have done any of this without you." They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the familiar landscape transform in the fading light. The ranch was quieter now than it had been when the children were small, but it was still full of life, still home. "No regrets?" Ethan asked. "Not a single one," Willa said firmly. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Ethan replied. "But I have you now, and that is enough." As the stars began to appear one by one, Willa thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia to Arizona, from fear to love, from isolation to family. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times, difficult years, moments of struggle and doubt. But there had also been joy. So much joy. In her husband's arms, in her children's laughter, in the satisfaction of a life well lived and a partnership well forged. The years continued their steady march. Samuel married a girl from town and built his own house on the ranch property, taking over more of the day-to-day operations as Ethan slowed down. Ellen found love with a schoolteacher who settled in Florence, and they built a life that combined her ranch upbringing with his education and books. James became a horse trader, buying and selling throughout the territory, while Catherine married a neighboring rancher's son and settled nearby. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new life and laughter. Willa became a grandmother, then a great-grandmother, watching the family tree she and Ethan had planted grow and branch in ways she never could have anticipated. Through it all, Ethan was by her side. They celebrated together, mourned together when Miguel and Carla passed within months of each other, supported their children through their own struggles and triumphs. Their love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. On a warm spring evening, more than 40 years after Willa had first stepped off that train, she and Ethan sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. They moved slower now, their bodies worn by age and hard work, but they still kept their evening ritual. "It is beautiful," Willa said, as she had said countless times before. "It never gets old," Ethan replied, as he always did. Willa looked at him, this man who had been her husband for over 4 decades. His face was weathered and lined, his hair completely white, his hands gnarled with arthritis. But his eyes were still warm, still kind, and when he looked at her, she still saw love. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For giving me a life. For being the man you promised you would be that very first day." Ethan smiled, that same genuine, warm smile that had melted her fear all those years ago. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for stepping off that train even though you were terrified, for building this life with me." He reached for her hand, and she gave it, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the stars began their nightly appearance. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Their children had children, and those children had children. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, then under his sons. The house Ethan's father had built still stood strong, still filled with family, still home. And through it all, the story of how it began was told and retold. The story of a frightened woman who stepped off a train in silence, and the rancher whose gentle words melted her fear and gave her the courage to choose love. It became family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single step into the unknown. Willa and Ethan lived out their days on the ranch they loved, surrounded by the family they had created. They passed within a year of each other, Ethan first, and then Willa, as though she could not bear to be apart from him for long. They were buried side by side on a small rise overlooking the ranch, under the vast Arizona sky they had both come to love. Their great-grandchildren still worked the land, still told stories about the couple who had started it all, still pointed to the old photograph on the mantel, the one of a young man and woman with hope in their eyes and their whole lives ahead of them. The ranch endured, generation after generation, a testament to the love story that had begun with a gentle voice and a frightened heart. And on warm evenings, when the family gathered on that same porch to watch the sunset, they thought of Ethan and Willa and the life they had built together. They thought about courage and kindness, about taking chances and keeping promises, about how the smallest moments can change everything. And they understood that some love stories, the truest ones, begin not with grand gestures but with simple words spoken in gentleness. With patience and understanding, with a promise kept and a fear overcome. With two people choosing every day to build something beautiful together. The sun set over the ranch as it had for decades, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The land remained, harsh and beautiful, full of life and promise. The house stood solid and welcoming, windows glowing with warm light. And in the quiet of evening, it was easy to imagine two figures sitting on the porch, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge one by one in the endless sky. The story of Ethan and Willa Abbott became part of the ranch itself, woven into every board of the house, every acre of land, every generation that followed. It was a story of love found in unlikely circumstances, of courage summoned in moments of fear, of two souls who took a chance on each other and built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And perhaps that is the truest measure of love, that it continues beyond the lives of those who created it, rippling outward through time and touching lives not yet lived. Ethan and Willa's love did exactly that, creating a foundation upon which their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren built their own lives and their own love stories. The gentle words Ethan had spoken that first day, the patience he had shown, the promises he had kept, all of it became part of the family's values, passed down and treasured. The courage Willa had shown in stepping off that train, in choosing to stay, in building a life in a strange land, that too became part of their heritage. Years turned to decades, and the world changed around the ranch. The Wild West became a thing of history books and legend. Arizona became a state. Trains gave way to automobiles, then to airplanes. The 20th century rolled into the 21st, bringing changes that would have been unimaginable to that young couple who had married in 1882. But the ranch remained, and with it, the story. New generations heard about their ancestors, about the mail-order bride from Philadelphia and the rancher who had won her heart with kindness. They heard about the life built through hard work and devotion, about the family that had sprung from that unlikely beginning. And some of those descendants, when facing their own moments of fear or uncertainty, would think of Willa stepping off that train, They would think of her silence, her terror, and then her courage. They would think of Ethan's gentle words, his patience, his kept promises. And they would find strength in knowing that they came from people who had faced the unknown with bravery and love. That is the power of a love story well lived. It becomes more than just the tale of two people. It becomes inspiration, becomes hope, becomes proof that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the choices we make in moments of fear can lead to a lifetime of joy. The house on the ranch still stood strong, renovated and modernized over the years, but retaining its essential character. The porch remained, though new boards had replaced the old ones many times over. And on warm evenings, the current generation of Abbotts still gathered there to watch the sunset, continuing a tradition that had started more than a century before. Sometimes they would sit in silence, comfortable in each other's presence, just as Ethan and Willa had done. Sometimes they would talk, sharing their days and their dreams. Always, they would feel the weight of history, the presence of all those who had come before, the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves. The photograph from Ethan and Willa's 10th anniversary had been carefully preserved, passed down through the generations. It sat in a place of honor in the ranch house, a window into the past. Young faces, barely lined, full of life and love. The formality of the pose could not hide the warmth between them, the connection that had sustained them through 4 decades of marriage and beyond. Beside it sat other photographs, dozens of them, documenting the family's growth through the years. Children and grandchildren, weddings and celebrations, the slow accumulation of a life well lived. Each face told a story, each image a moment frozen in time, but all of them connected by the threads of love and family that Ethan and Willa had first woven. The cradle Miguel had carved for Samuel still existed too, lovingly maintained and used by each new generation. How many babies had slept in that cradle? How many tiny hands had gripped its smooth wood? It had become a symbol of continuity, of the unbroken line stretching from Ethan and Willa forward into an unknown future. Their graves on the hill overlooking the ranch had become a place of pilgrimage for family members. New brides and grooms would visit, seeking the blessing of the ancestors. Children would run among the headstones, hearing stories about the people buried there. And sometimes, someone would come alone, seeking comfort or guidance or simply the peace that comes from connection to the past. The words on Willa's headstone were simple: beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She chose love and built a legacy. Ethan's were equally plain: beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He gave love and kept his promises. Simple words, but they captured the essence of 2 lives that had been anything but simple. As the modern world rushed forward, with its technology and its changes and its constant motion, the ranch remained a place somewhat apart. Not untouched by progress, but holding fast to the values that had built it. Hard work, honesty, family, love. These things did not change, even as everything around them did, and at the heart of it all was that original love story. The frightened bride and the patient rancher. The gentle words that had melted fear and opened the door to possibility. The choice to take a chance, to trust a stranger, to build something beautiful out of faith and hope and sheer determination. It was a reminder that love is not always easy, not always comfortable, not always what we expect. Sometimes it requires courage. Sometimes it requires us to step into the unknown, to trust when we have no reason to trust, to hope when hope seems foolish. But oh, what rewards can come from that courage! What joy can bloom from that trust! What beautiful things can grow from that hope! Willa had been 22 when she stepped off that train, her whole life ahead of her, and no idea what it would hold. Ethan had been 28, lonely and hoping for a partner to share his life. Neither could have imagined the future that awaited them, the family they would create, the legacy they would leave. But they had taken that first step together. They had chosen each other, day after day, year after year. They had built a life not on grand romantic gestures, but on small daily choices to be kind, to be patient, to be loving. And in doing so, they had created something that would outlast them by generations. That is the real happy ending, not the wedding or even the years of love that followed, but the continuation. The family that still gathered, still loved, still kept the values and traditions that Ethan and Willa had established. The ranch that still stood, still thrived, still provided a home for those who came after. The sun set one more time over the Abbott Ranch, as it had done countless times before and would do countless times again. The sky blazed with color, the land glowed gold, and the house stood solid and welcoming. Inside, a family gathered for dinner, multiple generations sharing food and laughter and love. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirits of Ethan and Willa watched over it all with satisfaction. They had done well, those two young people who had taken a chance on each other so long ago. They had built something strong and true, something that would endure. The story that had begun with silence and fear had ended with love and legacy. And that, truly, was the best ending anyone could hope for.